I don't know if we're back on. I'm going to carry on as if we're back, and then I might have to repeat myself. I don't know what point we left off, but I was answering Bob's question about character development, and it also touches on some of the other questions people have asked about. How much of the story did I know before I started writing? So I'll just go back a step, okay? When I was developing the idea of Jane as a story, as a children's picture book, I was actually developing two stories at the time. One was a story where I wanted to write a contemporary fairy story where the girl wasn't just ending up marrying the prince, but was she was fulfilling her dreams. And I didn't have the dragon in that story. At that point, I just wanted Jane to be learning to be a knight and not wanting to be a lady in waiting. And I'd started writing it, and it was okay, but it wasn't really doing it for me, I guess. I was also writing a story called The Last Dinosaur, because I was heavily into the environmental movement back in London, back then in the late 70s. And my partner back then, she worked for the World Wildlife Fund, and saving wildlife from extinction was such a big part of the debate back then, as it is now and as it should be. And I was wanting to write a story about what it would be like to be the last dinosaur on Earth, to be becoming extinct. A very child-centric story to try and make it emotionally impact young people on the need to preserve animals that are facing extinction. And it's then when I read about this thing called parthenogenesis. Now, parthenogenesis then became the tool that I wanted to use for why the last dinosaur, which then became the last dragon, what was the science rationale behind it, so that I could start to build a model around how do you save that last dinosaur, etc. So the idea started back then, and then it gelled into thinking about putting the two concepts together in one book. So the Jane and the Dragon picture book story was just Jane's story at the start. And then there was always this idea in the kids' book that they're just going to stay friends, and it's that responsibility of friendship. But in my mind, it was always going to be a much bigger story that I wanted to tell about the responsibility to preserve life, even why that mean a life of service. You see these incredible people around the world who spend their whole life living in the wild, supporting and protecting endangered species, and they've essentially given up their own social lives, everything that we would think of as being important to the day-to-day, because they've made a complete and absolute commitment to preserving and saving a species. So I wanted to bring those two things together. And then parthenogenesis, which is this fact that a lot of lizards and other creatures too, they essentially clone. Their offspring are clones. No male is required to, and it's obviously quite a successful way of reproducing, because a lot of those lizards survive today. And just as a side note, it's one of the hypotheses put forward by everybody who loves the story of the Loch Ness Monster. If the Loch Ness Monster was real, one of the problems is there will be a hole over millions of years. There must be lots of them down there to be breeding and reproducing and having new babies and all the rest of it. And then someone had put forward the parthenogenesis idea and saying, well, it could just be one female, and then she has a baby, and then that baby has a baby, and so at a theoretical level, there's a scientific basis, except there's not, because that's lizards, right? And dinosaurs are from the bird species, and I don't think parthenogenesis is in the bird line. But it's a nice idea. It's the idea that I used for this whole dragon blade concept of why dragons would allow humans to be to have something, a weapon made out of steel that is sharp enough. It's made sharp enough because it's forged in dragonfire, that can cut open the egg. So it's one of those issues around. Thank you, Grace. Yeah, I see your note there. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of stories about dragons and princesses over the years, and it's a well trod area. But Jane, I think Jane came out in the mid 80s, 86, I think, so predates most of them. Yeah, so that parthenogenesis was the idea, because it then gave me the tool for this incredible commitment that a young girl is going to have to make. Does she want to live her life, have a full life, have children of her own, live her own dreams and aspirations, or is she going to make a complete commitment to the preservation of another species? And that became the concept that sat behind Dragon Blade and has been with me right from the start. So to your point, Bob, and to a lot of others there, developing a character that's going to be able to evolve over a long time, when it's not just sitting inside a single book or a single episode or a series of a television drama. It's the problem of success that a lot of TV dramas face, where if the writers haven't, if you like, designed for success, they haven't prepared for success. So they go, well, there's the series and let's hope it's successful. And then suddenly it is. And you've seen series that become very disappointing when it gets to the second series, because the writers are having to scramble at speed to try and generate the storylines for a second series. That happens a lot less now because it's known to be a problem. So a lot of the bigger streamers and broadcasters require you to give the full season arc of the first season and the season arcs of at least 2 or 3 more seasons should the show be successful, but also for the first season to have a level of completion about it, so that if it doesn't go on to be made, it's not disappointing to all the viewers who've fallen in love with it. It's kind of a thing of itself. So that answers several of the questions that have come in about series arc. And it leads me to another question, which comes from Daniel, about where does Dragon Blade, the novel, sit in terms of the overarching story? What's its timeline in there? And why did I choose to write this novel in this place? And it also goes to another question. It answers to your question too, Bob. But it also goes to a question from Richard around I talked earlier about I wanted to develop this as a live action drama series, and Richard's asking, is Dragon Blade part of that exploration, and where does it sit in that? And oh, thanks, Shelley. Appreciate the comment. So where it sits, and the reason I've written Dragon Blade, pardon, just kicked my screen, in this part of the storyline, is because I wanted to move Jane's story forward for 2 reasons. One is, I know I can write a lot more novels set back in the castle before Jane leaves. But what I wanted to do is, before I send the pitch Bible off to try and get this up as a live action drama, I want to have it fully developed. And I want to have it fully developed and locked in terms of key story moments, because this was part of the issue I found with developing the children's TV show. A lot of the writers that came on board they wanted to have a very, very clear understanding of what the wriggle room they had within Jane's story arc, to tell stories that didn't move her character forward, but to your point, Bob, but allowed some form of development to take place within that episode without it changing the overall story arc, development arc. So this Dragonblade is part of my desire to lock in key aspects of what I hope would be a live action drama series. And this, I imagine, in my head is the third season. So I can see the first two seasons operating very, very effectively with all the characters we love, set inside the castle, where we're looking at the character development of Gunther. We're looking at the character development, of all the characters, really, and between Jane and the dragon. And we're able to lock in what's starting to happen, which is as Princess Lavinia is growing older and she's besotted with Jane. She absolutely loved Jane. And this answers, I must go to your question, just to make sure I get your name correct. I do apologize. Give me 2 seconds because they're on another sheet here. Opal. Is right. It seems like the Queen doesn't like Jane anymore. Did they have a fight and a falling out? Well, in the way I've seen it is, the Queen's always been hugely supportive of Jane. I think we see that in the TV series, and I've always seen her as quite a kind of a modern Queen who's brought around a lot of reform within the castle structure. I'm just have a sip of tea. My green tea for my cold throat. So, but she's a mother, right? What she needs most of all is to protect her family, her children. And we saw it in a few of the TV episodes where Lavinia, as a very, she's she's such a wonderful character. And she's got this extraordinary vitality to her. And she sees Jane as she's kind of a fan of Jane. And I guess she has a crush on Jane the way young girls will on older girls, and young boys will on older girls if you see a rugby hero or a sports hero. If you like, yes, Grace, to the point you've just raised, that's correct. What each of these phases, and I'm it's not meant to sound conceited, but the way the Star Wars universe, it's all over the place, but it's been put together reasonably well in terms of trying to understand what's happening where, and some of it had to be retrofitted in kind of weird ways, but it's probably the only franchise out there where they've really tried to work very hard at keeping that continuity, both for the sake of the fans' sanity and for writers to understand where in that universe they're writing. So because I know Jane's story, the whole arc in my head, Dragonblade has been written, as you've just said, Grace, and as many of you have noted in your questions. Why isn't she a kick-ass? Why isn't she a real sort of go-getter? Why can't we have stories where she's going out and she's defending the kingdom and knocking off the bad guys? And there's a lot of books and series out there. I've never seen Jane as kind of a Wonder Woman or a Xena. I mean, maybe none of you, most of you, would be too young to remember Xena, I would imagine. But Xena, warrior princess, she was this incredible kick-ass warrior, and I love those stories. But for me, I need Jane to be in turmoil and conflict because she's she wants to do the right thing. She wants to get everything. She wants to sort the world out. She's got a huge sense of justice. She's got this massive commitment to the dragon. So sorry, yes, Bat. Yes, your connection cut out earlier. Yes, I see Dragonblade as season 3 of a live action, not the animated series. So I'm trying to get Jane the Dragon up for an older age group. That's why she's now 17. So it's 5 years on. So in answer to some of the questions and what you just noted then is it's a YA novel. So probably the protagonist that's most recognizable to me in Jane's headspace is from Hunger Games, somebody who's not really a warrior, instinctively a warrior, somebody who's been thrust into a position of fighting for her own survival for the sake of her sibling, and ends up becoming this hero to other people, and has a political almost duty to fulfill, and then she's constantly carrying up. So yes, Jane is Katniss confirmed. Yeah, of course, Jane predated the Hunger Games, but that's who I see her. That's who I see her as. If I'm looking around the world at characters who I'm able to point to and go, there's a conflicted character who's trying her very, very best. They're not a superhero. They don't. But Jane does have a dragon. Now that's a pretty super thing to have, right? And a bit like with Superman, you've got to have the kryptonite. It's no good giving a young heroine a dragon that's like this super weapon and not having to build in some very tight issues around moral compass and things like that. So this Dragon Blade is written to be, in my head, this YA space. So it's for family viewing in the kind of, not Game of Thrones, but more like House of Dragons. It's the fantasy, maybe even dark materials. Perhaps dark materials is a better analogy for it, where you've got a young girl who's thrown in out of a debt, but she's got this incredibly strong moral compass. That is what keeps her on track and allows her to deal with all the other things that are going on. Yeah, that's right, Grace. I agree. The Merlin show, definitely. That's the sort of feel, isn't it? Because I don't want it to be this sort of effortless heroine. I think stories of conflict, and so it brings us to the some of these other questions, which I want to get to, because they're very, very important. A lot of you, quite naturally, are really upset around the death of Jester, and thank you for your very honest and open commentaries on that. I also thank you for nobody's been, maybe a lot of you are, but nobody's written in with any sort of. You've all been very, very gentle in your criticism around that, and I've asked some very important questions around it. Yes, I've always known this was going to happen. I did this. It wasn't just made up. Certainly wasn't made up to be like shock value. There's no value in shocking any of you, because I'm not trying to gain you as an audience. You already, love Jane, and so I bless you for reading the book and staying with it. What it is it's a very, very important turning point for Jane, and so there's a lot of threads in there that lead us to what will be the next book, and hopefully will be the fourth season of a live action. So I'm trying to keep up with the questions that are coming in, the chat ones, so I'll try to do that while I stay on track with my overarching answering of the questions. So Jester has always been this incredibly important character for Jane, in that she was the one person who believed in, or supported her right at the start, in the children's book, her passion to follow her dreams. He's been her strong supporter throughout, without having any kind of personal agenda around it, whereas a lot of the other people have got their own agendas, the king and everybody else. It's all about having the dragon there protecting the kingdom, and he's kind of duplicitous in all of that. And we see a lot of that. A lot of that politics I want to open up and explore in the first season of the live action. So the first season of the live action is still 5 years after the TV series. So she'll be 17 years old. And that I see the third season as this Dragon Blade. And then she leaves. And then we move on to the fourth season. I'll be writing that out as a novel. Writing them as a novels gives me full control and allows me to really lock all these key elements in before you suddenly get a team of writers. If we're ever, who knows whether we can ever get enough development money to turn this into a live action project, but that's my aspiration. That's what I'm hoping for. And writing it as a TV series helps me. So Jester's own journey, his story. He's always been a very timid character, and if you read back through Dragon Blade, now that you know the ending, you'll see it's as much Jester's story, and he's got this right from when he's up on the battlements, and he's got this fear when Jane takes off and goes on this a fear which he always has, and I'm trying to see Dragon Blade as much through Jester's eyes and explore it as much through Jester's eyes, because it's very much his conflict too. As one of you said, why doesn't he help Gunther? He's kind of trying to, but he's trying to work out if Gunther's for real or not, because Gunther, through season 1 and 2, they're all beginning to understand that Gunther is got his own demons, which we're aware of through the TV show, the animated show. And that he's got this, mystery he's got to resolve of, did his father kill his mother, and does his father even really love him? What happened to his birth father? And so Gunther's story, I don't want to reveal any of that. Gunther's not dead. I'll reveal that, okay, at the end of this series. That there is a teaser there that, Magnus has got all that blood on him. Is it his blood or is it Gunther's blood? It's Magnus's blood. Gunther did try and do the right thing at the end and try to stop his father. Jane will learn this out in the further series going forward, so what precipitates then Jane on her journey when she goes at the end of this series, probably the postscript to this book, or the final chapter, or the whatever you call it, when you do a final wrap up. She knows she's going to have to leave the castle. Theodore's going to suggest that she, rather than the king and the queen going, "You've done it, you've done your dash, you've got to go now," that Theodore's suggestion to her is that she asks leave of the king to go and find the merchant and Gunther and bring the merchant back for justice. And that way, Theodore's suggestion is Jane's buying a bit of time so the king isn't making a proclamation. And Jane will be going off on this mission to find Gunther and try and bring him back safely. Try to find out if he's still alive, firstly, and to bring the merchant back for justice. But she's also wanting to. She made a promise to herself. She makes a promise to herself that she's going to find out Jester's name, so that he doesn't want a headstone. He wants to be burned like a Norseman on a pyre out on a boat. But she wants to have his name in a ballad, the ballad of Jester that she wants to have written, and the song that she wants to have written about him. And so she wants to know his name. So those are the two threads. She'll go on a series of adventures. It becomes a bit like a road movie, the fourth season, where she will have some kick-ass adventures, solves people's problems, but she'll be trying to find Gunther, protect him, or find out what happened to him. And obviously she'll get caught up in resolving his big story about what happened to his mother. So that all happens there. Jester, I've always known Jester would die at this point. I never seen Jester. I can't see the world of Jane beyond this point. I've always, in my mind, had Jester dying at this point. And the reason for that is also it becomes a massive emotional weight for Jane to deal with, and a moral turning point, a place in her life about consequences and what happens. And everybody faces those. Everybody's got those in their lives. And I want to have a real solid, dark, meaningful one for Jane as we move forward. So we will learn. So to some of your questions about will we learn more about Jester as a character? Well, we will learn more about his history through Jane, because she's going to find out where he came from and when he got dropped off, and she wants to tell the family what's happened to him, his blood mother and father, and to be able to say what a heroic boy they had and how loved he was. And so she's got that kind of personal mission that sits alongside the stories, the bigger stories that we want to tell. But the backdrop of Jane and the Dragon is also set up against a backdrop of a period. It's an alternative history of the UK of that period, of course. It's not the actual history. So that answers a lot of your sort of questions that have come in. So thank you for those. I think I'm starting to lose my voice. We're going for nearly an hour here. I think I'm going to leave that there. I want to do another session, so keep the questions coming in. But I just want to answer a couple more from people that are not so much about Jane and the Dragon. No, actually, what we'll do another live session, and all the questions that have come in that are about taking Wonderland, about writing and illustrating, about the what's, about Thunderbirds. Let me answer all those in a separate live feed, and I'll try to wrap up. I'll go back through the questions in a moment after this is finished and see which ones I didn't manage to cover off. But I hope that's given you a sense of where this sits in the world, why the decisions were made that were made. And they're not, none of them were made lightly. I love these characters, and they are they're so important to me. Next to my own children and grandchildren, they're the most important people in my life. All right, thank you all very much for today. And I know some of you will be watching this later on various feeds. So if you've got further questions that arise out of what I've just said today, please send those questions in and we'll have them for the next session. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Bat. Thank you, Indigo. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bob. There's so many of you. So thank you all very much indeed for today. It's lovely knowing you're out there, knowing that that you love Jane and that you care enough to be cross with me when you don't like what I'm doing with her. So forgive me if I've done things which you don't like, but I hope you understand what the reasons I've done them. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye. Thanks, Kiki. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.